Welcome to Love Your Job, Love Your Life podcast. And this is another episode, which is the mini series where we're looking a little bit at the men's spiritual awakening series. And the more and more I'm talking about this, the more and more people seem to be approaching me about some weird, wonderful, unique, different approaches. And today I'm joined by Steve Pavis. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, James.
So, look, I'm not going to try and introduce Steve. I'm going to pass that straight over to him. But Steve is what I would call a healer, and we will dive into what he does in a bit more detail later on. But Steve, do you want to kickstart by you giving a very brief introduction to yourself and what you classify as healing?
Sure thing. Thanks, James. So, I guess like from one end of a spectrum, I help with hands-on work with people in pain, physical stuff, a bit like a chiropractor, osteopath, physio kind of would do. But I guess throughout my career, I have come across a lot of weird and wonderful experiences personally, and they've opened my eyes to actually understanding that we're made up of a lot more than just a physical body, just skin and bones. There's a lot more to it, and having a great opportunity of actually training and working with some of the most powerful energy healing guys on the planet, and it's become really clear to me that there's so much more to tap into than just who we are as a physical being, and there's layers to it and there's depth to it. And I'm hesitant to say magic to it, but I guess if we don't understand sort of the biology, the physics, and the chemistry behind the magic, it can seem a bit out there and woo-woo. So essentially, from like maybe if we were to try and define healing, I would say it's just to bring us into a state of balance, a state of harmony, where we're not in chaos, where we're not out of control with our body running out of control with health issues, our mind running out of control, and imbalance on a mental level, and our emotions spinning out and causing disharmony and therefore harmful behaviors, harmful effects that will spill out into our life.
Yeah. And this has become so important in today's world, almost, let's call it world, because there are so many people that are in disharmony. There are so many people in the corporate world that are probably watching this that, they're waking up, they're waking up with something as simple as a bad back. They go to work, they're struggling to get focused at work. We've got burnout issues, we've got mental health issues, we've got physical issues. Every organization is facing these challenges, which from your perspective, what you're saying is these are not just physical issues. These are energetical issues within the body, which is causing the body to almost change and alter, which is causing the pain. So it's more sort of, is it kind of, and maybe you can talk a little bit about the biology, the physical, the biological part of it to help explain it. But certainly I've had points in my life where I've had severe pain problems. And then actually when you get to the under the skin of it, it's not muscular, it's not stress, it's something else that's blocked that actually needs releasing or easing. So can you give a little bit more of an explanation around the science that sits behind this thing called energy healing that you're talking about?
Yeah, sure. So I think when we love categorizing and breaking down everything into component parts. It helps our human brain understand things easier. But by breaking things down and separate them into their own little boxes, kind of miss the holistic nature of how everything is actually connected and integrated. So we tend to go and see, say you've got a bad back, you see someone, a physical therapist, for instance. If you've got emotional issues, you might go to a counselor or a psychiatrist, if we've got mental issues, again, we may go and see someone, may look to get drugs, antidepressants, etc., to try and help the mental side of things. So I think it probably helps from a physics perspective to see how all of these different aspects are actually connected. So the understanding of harmonics is a really key aspect of understanding how all of this is a spectrum, a connected spectrum. So if I was to get, say, 3 guitars lined up next to each other, and I tune the central guitar standard tuning. I tune the guitar to the left 1 octave lower and the guitar to the right 1 octave higher. when I strike, let's just say the A string on that central guitar, both guitars left and right, an octave higher, an octave lower, the A string will also have to start vibrating via the law of harmonics.
Right. Okay.
And so that's not just limited to the bandwidth of sound. Beyond sound, if we think of the electromagnetic spectrum, we have the visible light spectrum. But when you go down past red, you go to infrared and microwaves and radio waves. We kind of have sections, bandwidth of a spectrum. So if we think about those guitars, what exists above the octaves, the higher octaves beyond the guitar, beyond sound, and what might exist beyond the lower octaves beyond sound on the other side of things. So our physical body is vibrating. Physical reality vibrates on very low frequency. We essentially know with quantum mechanics that everything is energy. So essentially everything is made up of energy, which is essentially light. So our physical world is our reality, our tangible world, quite low frequency light waves. As we go up the octaves, as we go up the spectrum, the waves get faster, and the next kind of bandwidth that we bump into are emotional bandwidths of light frequencies. So emotions really are just faster light waves than the physical world. So if you have a back problem, that's an issue or a disharmony that's going on slow physical light waves. Yeah. But at the same time, because of the law of harmonics, there is going to be an emotional equivalent that's vibrating at a slightly higher frequency. Thoughts are even faster light waves that are vibrating at a higher frequency on a higher octave. Yeah. And we could go on to what some of the higher octaves beyond those harmonics could be all about. And that's where we start to get into more of quantum energy. And we start to get into things like a higher self, and we start to get into some more energy healing. So what does that mean kind of on an actual practical basis? It means that if we can bring into harmony one of the higher octaves that would be considered more energetic, emotional, mental, they're not tangible, but they're faster light waves. Those light waves will bring harmony further down the octave scale into the physical body and then even further beyond. So it kind of doesn't matter which octave you jump in at. There's a lot of wonderful things around sound healing, right? With tuning forks and crystal bowls and we can use the vibrations of crystals, and so crystal healing starts to become something it's a biological physics and chemistry of attuning us to the right vibration. And whichever octave is your speciality of working on, you're having the knock-on harmonizing effects in all of the upper frequencies or harmonics further up and down the scale.
So what you're saying, if I understand this correctly, is if you have a pain on your back, that will be a low frequency, but in actual fact, the pain could increase where your emotional frequency is also increasing, where your mental frequency is then increasing it even further. So often the pain that you feel isn't necessarily a pain in that point in your body. It's often through a higher frequency that also needs to be brought back into line or harmony with the pain.
Sure. To some degree, it's more that there's a corresponding frequency up through the harmonics. If there's an issue on the physical, there's a corresponding emotional, there's a corresponding mental, etc. going on. So they're never discrete individual issues. A lot of people would say to me, this is just about back, Steve. There's nothing emotional. Don't worry about that. My mental health's fine at the minute. But the laws of physics dictate that there has to be corresponding components all across the spectrum. So it's not something that is simply isolated.
Yeah. So relating this back to work, because this is, and I did a podcast with somebody else the other week who entrepreneur, hugely successful, ended up unable to move. And the doctors couldn't say, this is the problem. But what you're saying is actually the problem probably could have come from just disharmony across all of the different areas. So it could have been mental, it could have been emotional, and also physical. So burnout, your body is physically tired. Burnout, you are mentally tired and emotionally tired. So you're kind of tired in all three of those categories, which causes almost catastrophic issues with the body. So does it apply? So, it might just be a bad back, but with things like burnout or some of the, or mental health, depression, those types of things, is that having a catalytic effect on the overall body, which is causing some of these major problems?
Yeah, definitely. Of course, what's presenting to us in our life and our environment are going to be the influences on these different levels. So things like that we chatted the other day, but like Wi-Fi signals and phone signals, etc. They're not physical, tangible energy waves that we can see or touch, but we know they exist. And so those waves are actually our technology that we produce for all its benefits and phenomenal benefits that we have. We wouldn't be here doing this today. It's disrupting those more subtle energy parts of ourselves. So actually, it's disrupting our mental waves. I mean, it's disrupting our emotions. And all of that feeds down, it percolates down into the physical body. And at some point, it has to all feed into the physical. So often, like a back pain could be, for instance, the electromagnetic waves from Wi-Fi, etc., could be contributing largely. But if your relationship at home isn't going very well with your partner, that's affecting us on mental levels and emotional levels, of course. And if we've just had a death of a loved one or someone, a family member or friend, we don't necessarily see that actually what percolates down into the physical body, that bad back blowing up. We can always find very quickly that there has been some level of mental or emotional trauma at some point, or is ongoing at the moment, that is causing that flare-up to happen.
Yeah.
And it becomes really apparent. I guess this is the thing that freaked me out early on when I was doing my hands-on fascial work, is that you think we're just working with physical muscles, fascial tissue, etc. But when someone erupts after 20 minutes and tells you that they were raped when they were 10 years old, out of the blue, and you realize that the pain that they came to you with has been something that has been physically held and manifesting in their body that came from an extreme mental, emotional, physical trauma early on in their life.
Yeah.
That was when these things started happening almost every day to me, when people just had to blurt it out because we had aligned everything on a physical level, but so therefore we had aligned everything on mental and emotional levels. Up it would come quite often and would have to be expressed. And that's often where the healing can really happen, when those aha moments happen. And it doesn't always have to be the big stuff, it doesn't have to come with tears and emotional trauma. A lot of people are very quiet and just have really deep, profound realizations that when I'm doing what I'm doing, they have the everything aligns, the breadcrumbs pave the way to think, oh, do you know what this is reminding me of, these feelings, these thoughts that are coming up. I know what this is. And I've been either hiding from it, running from it, or suppressing it my entire life. And it doesn't necessarily mean they now have to do something about it. Just the realization and the awareness of what this is. And that's a very common phrase. They say, I know what this is now. Just that awareness is almost enough just for the change to happen. And then the healing is the process of change.
Wow. And so how has this evolved? Because I mean, look, I talk about men's mental health, and I think back, I'm heading towards the big 50. So let's say halfway through my life, Steve. And when I think about my working career, and even if I think back 10 years, maybe 10 years ago, people just weren't necessarily talking about this stuff. And certainly from a from a men's perspective, we just carried on. We went to work, we carried on, we shut down our emotions. I talk a lot about masks. We put our mask on, we go into work. And, my story of what happened to me, even 5 years ago, I put a mask on and nobody at work would know any of the struggles or the challenges that I was facing outside of work. So we're very good at doing this. What seems to be the change that you're seeing that's now meaning that, either people are more open to it, or is it the science that's coming through that's helping to make people more aware? What are you seeing? What's happening that's raising awareness, that's helping men and women are suffering from it as well now in the workplace, but men and women, what's helping them to kind of come to you and are more open to these alternative ways of healing ultimately?
Yeah, I think, do you know what? Still the bread and butter is the physical stuff. When you're completely debilitated on a physical level, you want to get it, you want to, and you're in pain, you need to get that sorted ASAP. So that's often the route in. I don't have so many people going, I wonder if I should go and see Steve and uncover a load of traumatic events throughout my life. It doesn't sound like an appealing adventure, right? But when you
That's for me, Steve. So let's get something booked in afterwards.
That's great. That's great. I think we are getting, I'm having these conversations with yourself, and, we were introduced to each other through our friend Matt. And, I'm having conversations with more and more men who are starting to appreciate more and more that actually, do you know what? We've known there's emotional issues. We've known there's mental issues. And why would we go to discrete individual therapists for your mental health, your emotional health, or your physical health, when actually, when we understand it from a scientific basis, that actually, why don't we look to bring harmony to all of those levels and actually get down to the root cause of what's happening? Because a lot of folks come to me, I guess, when they've seen every physical person under the sun, had a few operations, done pretty much on the last port of call. So I'm the guy who's kind of on the fringes of what is orthodox, moving into the woo-woo, you could say. And I guess when people get to the end of their tether and they seem to have tried everything and realize that actually the problem is still there. So we haven't got to that root cause yet. And it's going to continue to be there if we don't. So what have we got to lose at that stage to actually come in? And you know, I think one part of the biggest part, I'm still a pretty down to earth guy. I've got a very spiritual side, and some of the things I've worked with and experienced in my life are just almost not even possible in most folks' eyes. But at the same time, as one of my clients says, I still come to you regularly, Steve, because we can talk about beer and rugby as well. And I think that's a really important thing for men. It's that you're still approachable, you're still down to earth, and you might talk about some concepts that are slightly far out, tough to get a grasp on sometimes, but at the same time, we can catch up on the weekend sport and what we're up to on what's going on, So I think it's a combination of men, especially wanting to take more to become more empowered over their own health and their own lives.
Yeah.
And understand, that really, I think men are exhausted from that mask.
They are. I totally agree. If I showed my camera around my office, I've got singing bowls, I've got a shamanic drum, I've got an altar, I've got incense, I've got crystals. So I've been in this space for many years, literally many years, probably heading to 25 years or so that I've been interested in it. But it's never been spoken about. Most people that I've worked with in my career never knew anything about it. More latterly, probably people knew about my, and I'm going to say my crystal habit, because that sounds funny, but not many people have known my approach to things. And my approach goes right back from an energy perspective, looking at ley lines and the impact that ley lines and water and everything can have on you, because it significantly affected me in my early 20s when I was sitting in a flat and I would be like a zombie. because I was sitting on two ley lines crossing, and that's where it all started for me. But that's the same kind of thing, right? That's energy. It's energy from the earth that's creating negative impacts on the body. Back to your disharmony piece. How do we, I say, how do we, that people may be listening to this saying, right, well, this is really interesting and fascinating, but how do we change the narrative on it, Steve? Because I love the concept that people can come to you and they can chat about rugby and at the same time have some healing done, energy healing done on themselves. But it's becoming a problem. Men's mental health statistics continue to go, even with the talk of what needs to be done, they continue to plateau / go the wrong way. We talk about it more and more, but action doesn't seem to be taking process or precedence. I'm trying to raise awareness, clearly, which is why we're doing what we're doing today. But what else do you feel can be done, if anything, to support men, or maybe even women, but to support men through this process? Because it is difficult. You know, I've been to a singing bowl therapy session, and I've been the only guy there in a room of 20 women. I've been to breath work and the only guy in a room of 20 women. And I'm comfortable with that, but lots of men would struggle with that, right? So how do we raise awareness, and how do we encourage more men to try some of this, what I would call alternative therapy, which truly does make a massive, massive difference?
Yeah, and that's almost our current challenge, and something that I continue to ponder about how we can make something that can be talked about on a very scientific level approachable and accessible. Because let's be honest, it's majority, as you've experienced, there's a tendency more for females to want to explore these certain things, classes, experiences, and whatever. And you know, I was actually having a chat with my wife a few months ago, kind of with a similar question in mind, as to why is it that men will often choose, rather than go for a walk and a chat, use a hit session and a podcast to listening to the podcast whilst they're doing their hit session, just to double up on actually, you know. And I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that in today's world, it feels extremely pressurized and puts us in quite a high level in our nervous system of fear and a really strong need to survive, to constantly be working, to constantly be achieving, to be listening to those podcasts, to be doing those hit sessions. The pressure to do and create is really sped up for us, I feel. And so when you've got a nervous system that is driving you and says, you slow down for 1 minute, you die.
Yeah.
Then you're not going to slow down for a second. You're going to stay at that level that maintains your survival, as part of your nervous system is assuming.
Yeah.
And I think it's just natural for women to have a part of their nervous system that does say slow down, rest, recover, reset, nourish. Men are very much more on a nervous system of work harder, get more stuff done, achieve, because we need to pay the bills. You know, with the cost of living's going up, everything's going up. If we don't survive. And if that pressure primarily is still, you know, I suppose stereotypically on men, although that's changed a lot, of course, but stereotypically, it's generally, I know when I go to soft play with my son, you know, it's still mostly women there.
Yeah.
They're the ones looking after the kids generally more. Men are the ones out to work earning the money still, mostly. Is that those opportunities that the nervous system is driving our behavior.
Yeah.
And that's really tough to say, hey, come here. Let's reset. Let's slow down. Let's open up. Let's find that space where you can feel safe, and so all of a sudden start processing all of this backlog of pressure that's built up inside of us.
Yeah.
And the nervous system says, if we do that, we die. We put our guns down on the battlefield and stand with our arms open, we're dead. And we cannot afford that. So I guess, once again, it often comes down, really sadly, to rock bottom, when we are forced and completely debilitated, when those divorce papers are handed across the kitchen table one morning, out of the blue when your back blows up and you can't work for 6 months.
Yeah.
All sorts of different scenarios, is that then we have to pay attention. So actually, these big events that happen in our lives quite often are big neon signs of saying, hey, we have to now start doing something about this. We cannot ignore this any longer. If you do, that it's all going to fall apart.
Yeah. And that's what happened. That's what happened to me. And look, I'm a big supporter of physical fitness, and I do a lot of running and a lot of walking. But sometimes actually, when I reflect back on when I've taken it to the extreme, and I think about why did I take it to the extreme, there was often a reason why I took it to the extreme, which was I was running away from something, I was hiding something, I was trying to block something out, I wasn't being honest and open with myself. And that physical demand of training, as you say, the HIIT training allows you to cover up what actually is going wrong, or what actually is affecting your body. And I've done a few Ironmans in my time, and that was an escapism for me to go out on my bike for 5-6 hours on a Sunday, or to do 16, 17 hours of training a week, because that was my escapism from actually, rather than facing what the problem was, it was actually more about going out there and covering it up and blanking it out and just getting on with my life with one of those masks on. So it's and that's what I think a lot of people do, Steve, is, as you've rightly explained, they go out there and they find an alternative to cover up and mask over what actually the problem is, until they get to a point where it goes bang. And that could be something as simple as your back going, or it could be burnout, or it could be marriage breakups or relationship breakups, or a whole host of other things, even worse than that, which we know happens. So this has been a fascinating conversation. I think you and I could talk about energy healing and the impacts it has on the body and the mind and the soul for many hours. As we bring kind of the podcast to a close, what would be your advice that the kind of, if anyone's listening to this and kind of going, actually, do you know what? That's really interesting. I'd like to find out more information, or where do I start? Or, because it is a bit of a minefield. You go on and you put in healing, and there are 101 different things that you could go to, you could try, any advice for anybody?
Yeah, I think, the simplest advice really is, we kind of touched upon this a bit earlier, is that we're energetic beings as well as physical beings. And we tend to think of ourselves a bit separate from our environment, from the earth, from the elements, from nature. And really, for us to come into balance and come into harmony, we need to spend more time connected to the actual real, plugged into the real world, not the synthetic technology world. So we need to spend a bit more time, almost, if we think of it as if we spend 2 hours on a laptop or on our devices, that we understand that there's going to be repercussions of that will disharmonize us. That means we need to put enough time connecting to nature. And that sound, again, I never really got that when I heard that originally said to me. It's just like, I'll just go out for a walk walk past a few nice trees in the park or something, and that will be it. But again, I like to link it back to more of a scientific point of view of, actually, you would not believe what the low-hanging fruit, the easy, free stuff, is getting outside, and just without your contact lenses or your glasses in, and getting some sunlight in your eyes, various points in the day when you've been inside all day behind screens, behind glass that filters out the full spectrum of the sun's rays. To actually get your feet on the bare ground, if you could connect to the grounding, 15 minutes a day, it would almost harmonize every harmonic level, your physical, your emotional, your mental. Those 2 things. Easiest thing. You don't have to go to a group and spill your guts out. We don't have to wear your big baggy pants to a singing bowl thing. You could lean against a tree for a bit, or you could just get your bare feet out, stand on your lawn whilst looking at whilst taking in some of this light that's around us. These are the absolute fundamentals. And if the big gauge on that is I actually think about when was the last time you spent any time connected to the earth? And I could go on about the science as to why that's important, but I won't for now. But there's so much health to be gained, physical, mental, emotional health by just spending a bit of time, 15 minutes connected to the earth. Don't have to be bare feet, bloody freezing out there at the minute still, leaning against a tree, whatever. You can even buy grounding mats and grounding stuff, so you can actually inside use the tech. But getting sunlight in your eyes at various points in the day, it only needs to be 3 or 5 minutes. So we can all do that. The benefits of that alone will shift everything.
Yeah. And it's so important. I do it all the time. I still have to consciously go out and do it, but I always go out walking when the sun's out. Very rarely wear sunglasses, certainly this time of the year, to enable me to get natural daylight into my eyes. But often this time of year is quite tough to do that, and I think this is why we often see more issues, burnout, mental health issues during the winter months rather than the summer months, because we naturally are indoors rather than being outdoors. So I love that advice. Go out there, get some fresh air, realize how important it is to give your body that fresh air and harmonize it back, as Steve says, to make it grounded to the earth. So I love that, Steve. Steve, look, this has been absolutely fascinating. We didn't touch on any of there's a whole host of things that I was going to talk about that we never got to. But so maybe there's another one, because we talked about dysregulation and the dysregulation of bodies and how we can overcome that. We touched on it with a little bit of tech, but I think there's a whole host of other stuff that we can do related to that. But Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Hopefully we've opened some eyes to a different way of thinking about energy and a different way to bring your body back into harmony, and maybe to overcome ailments that you might have had for many years that have been locked away from based on some form of trauma. So look, Steve, how can anyone, if anyone's interested in talking to you further, how can they get in contact with you?
Sure. So I run two brands essentially. One is my physical brand, so which I call Fascial Energetic Bodywork. It's a combination of everything I've learned over the years with hands-on, and I bring my energy work to that, but it's much more on the physical level, so physical pain level. So that's my Fascial Energetic Bodywork, and that's the website, fascialenergeticbodywork.com. And you could say the other side of things, as we know, we're more than that physical body, is to bring those more subtle parts of ourselves into balance, are the various therapies that I use under that brand, which is Soul Start Healing Therapies.com.
Great. I'll put the links in the video underneath so you can click on those. But Steve, thank you for joining me. It's been an interesting conversation. Absolute pleasure talking to you, and look forward to continuing our conversations offline.
Thanks, James. Good to see you.